catastrophic storms.
The main evacuation center in New Orleans is the Superdome.
Epic wildfires. I've watched this slow-motion train wreck, and so have you. And now the question is, can we stop what we started at the dawn of the industrial age before it's too late? To do that, as much as we can, we need to stop burning things. Stop emitting greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, or we will have made our planet a very uncomfortable place to live. But how to avoid that? What is the road to carbon zero? It's a long trip.
Danger. The biggest climate risk right now is the so-called transition risk. The risk of rapidly getting rid of fossil fuels.
Dr. Judith Curry.
In the field for a while. I got my PhD in 1982, and one of the biggest concerns about global warming was the Arctic sea ice. And over the last decade, I've focused primarily on climate dynamics, extreme weather events, predictability and prediction, some of science issues really related to what we can learn from models, understanding uncertainty and ignorance, and social psychology issues surrounding how we interpret all. I am president of Climate Forecast Applications Sector, and I work a lot with people having to make real decisions.
Climate change. What is your view on climate change?
Okay, first I'm going to talk about the sociology of why certain people have been separated out as heretics or even called deniers. The basic facts of the situation are pretty clear. The temperatures, global temperatures have been warming. Humans emit CO2 into the atmosphere. CO2 has an infrared emission spectra, which overall acts to warm the planet. But there's a lot of disagreement about the most consequential issues. How much of the warming has been human-caused? How important is human-caused warming relative to solar variability, ocean circulation patterns, and so on? So there is some very legitimate disagreements, about this topic. Myself and others that are in this category that you're talking about, we don't dispute the basics. What we do object to is the idea of a manufactured consensus for political purposes. This is not a natural scientific consensus that has emerged over a long time. It's a manufactured consensus of scientists, at the request of policymakers, which has been too narrowly framed. There's too much politics in it. And, that's what I object to, and there's a number of other scientists that object to this as well. And we've also been critical of the behavior of some of the more politically active scientists who are exaggerating the truth in the interests of a good story or political objectives or whatever. So that's what it's about. It's not about any fundamental scientific disagreement.
It seems to have changed in terms of terminology. It was global warming, and then that shifted to climate change, and recently it's now a climate emergency. What potential reasons are there for this shift in terminology?
Well, people are trying to figure out how they're going to get people's attention. Okay, now they use global heating. Heating sounds more dangerous than warming. Warming sounds sort of nice. The attention is really shifted to these extreme weather events, hurricanes and floods and heat waves and whatever. But there's very little evidence to tie. That's really part of natural weather and climate variability. Any signal from global warming usually can't be teased out. It's very difficult to tease out from natural variability. These events would have happened anyways. There's a whole bunch of complicated motives here. People's worldview, their politics, career investments in a certain narrative, wanting to play various political games, working in the climate area, and you want to advance and get grant money and professional recognition, you would be well served to hew to the alarmist narrative. I mean, the people who are getting professional recognition and being put in charge of big institutes and centers are all alarmists who speak about doom and gloom and exaggerate.
How far is reality from this doom and gloom feeling?
It's very far. It's very far from gloom and doom. Okay.
So it's not upon us.
No, doing people who think that they can control the climate by, it's just a pipe dream. Even if we went to net zero, we would barely notice. It would be hard to detect any change in the climate. The climate's going to do what the climate's going to do, and there's a lot of inertia in the system. If the carbon dioxide that we put in is as important as bad as some people seem to think, those effects are going to be with us for a very, very long time. And stopping now isn't going to, change that trajectory very much. Pre-industrial, the weather was horrible. This was at the end of the Little Ice Age. It's the coldest period of the millennium. The weather was much worse in the 1930s by any measure. Forest fires, droughts, heat waves, hurricanes, everything that you can imagine in the U.S. was much worse in the 1930s. Does anybody remember that? Well, no, most of those people are no longer living. But if you look at the data, there it sits. Most people just look at the data since 1950 or 1970. The 1970s and 1980s, that was a relatively benign period of weather. And so if you just do the trend since 1970, the weather is worse now. Well, yes, but it's not worse than the 1930s or 40s or even the 50s. People are much more prosperous globally. Poverty is way down. Life expectancy is up. We're doing very well, as we reduce poverty and human development advances. A lot of that has been, fueled by petroleum and coal. Are there better fuels out there? Well, hopefully in the future there will be. Advanced nuclear and stuff like that, very promising, advanced geothermal. But right now, this minute, having our entire energy infrastructure relying on wind turbines and solar energy is just going to cause a lot of harm to a lot of people, not just to the overall economy. You can't run an industrial economy on wind and solar, at least the way it's currently envisioned. It requires a huge land footprint, which people, at least in the U.S., even the sort of environmental people are fighting against new transmission lines and wind turbines because of various perceived ecological impacts. That nobody wants a landscape covered with wind turbines and transmission lines. Just people haven't thought this out. And there's no emergency. But we're all going to be better off, moving forward through the 21st century, unless we do really stupid stuff like destroy our energy infrastructure before we have something better to replace it with. Okay, that's the biggest danger. The biggest climate risk right now is the so-called transition risk, the risk of rapidly getting rid of fossil fuels. Yeah, I'm no fan of pollution and crazy price spikes and whatever. I'd love to see inexpensive, cleaner, reliable, secure energy, better than what we have now. But going to 100% renewables is not a better solution. Storage, people talk about, hydrogen backup is right. All of this is decades away. The time between now and 2050 needs to be a period of technological development and experimentation. Different countries, different states, trying different things, see what works. And from there, some good solutions will emerge. But trying to mandate that everybody goes to wind and solar is going to be an unmitigated disaster. The supply chain for all of this doesn't exist right now. It's very material intensive.